In this talk, the main goal would be just really to explain our process of helping new employees get up to par, get them to a place where they can feel that A, they are contributing and doing meaningful stuff, and B, that they provide actual value to the R&D team. And doing that in the most efficient and shortest path to that point. So basically, I'm trying to combine these two aspects of it. From one side, we want, as an R&D group, we want the ability to adopt new employees and get them providing values to us as fast as possible. On the other hand, we want those employees to feel that they're doing actual meaningful work as well. So the strategy to get there is we're going to discuss or cover these 5 kind of stations or points that I try to get those employees to go through. So just real quick, I'm going to go over it. So first of all, we're going to talk about the need to cover the basics. There's some basic elements that need to be in place whenever you get to a new workplace. And you have to know that stuff. Second is the importance of working on a real project as fast as possible. As opposed to letting new employees work on their own in a vacuum and studying some theoretical stuff that's related to the real work that the team is doing. The third one is the probably most important thing in this discussion, the concept of pair programming, which we'll go a little bit into. Then I'll talk about the importance of ownership and paying it forward. So let's talk about the basics. So to begin with, when we accept a new team member, I'm aiming for a period that can take a couple of days and up to 2 or 3 weeks. And in that time frame, I let the new employee work on some predefined plan that we have for each new employee, containing some getting started information. So basically, this means there's a wiki, or some kind of, everybody knows what's a wiki? Okay, so there's going to be some kind of knowledge base that needs to be incremental. So it needs to incrementally grow and be adapted to changing realities, okay? The question was, do they have to grow those knowledge bases, or would they eventually reach to a point where they start to shrink? I'm going to address that in a minute, because I'm not sure that we found something interesting about this topic, because wikis are notoriously known for being out of sync, right? Because a lot of people, that go through the wiki, they find a mistake in there. They're not going to spend the time or invest the time to make that edit and change and correct the mistake. And part of it is due to the fact that mostly these are new employees. They don't feel confident enough to introduce this change. So, and I don't think it's realistic to expect it to happen. We've been testing these methods for a while, and we don't see it happening. So what I find is very beneficial in this regard. Those mistakes are excellent opportunities for finding out the the not so tidy aspects of developing software in Wix. Meaning, there's a mistake in the wiki, you should do this and expect that outcome. You do that and you get a different outcome. And that is due to a mistake in the wiki, but it usually also involves some sort of a conversation or some sort of mini research phase where the new employee goes through and he needs, or they need to talk to the relevant personnel in order to sort that out and find out, oh, so the wiki is broken. So whether they fix it or not, that's a whole other thing. I find value in the fact that it also contains those errors because it kind of motivates them or drives them to basically introduce themselves and create these personal contacts. And at the moment, we're quite a large group. When I just got to Wix, we were kind of small. So now the R&D is kind of big, but it's funny because it's still very important for you to know personally the CI guy, which is here, the system guy, right? Or the DBA, or those key positions that enable you to get stuff done that is beyond your responsibility. Okay? So what we do is we have a wiki that basically handholds you through the process of having a service fully, a hello world service, fully deployed in production, and that's like the basics. That covers the basics. The question was, how do you decide what is included in the introductory section, in the basics that you need to learn, because there's a huge infrastructure in place. And by the way, ours is quite large as well. But I think, so what I find that doesn't work is just let someone work through the code. Oh, here's the framework, right? So it's 30-something modules. Here, have a look. That doesn't work. Here, take two months to read through this stuff. That really doesn't work. Okay, it's a total waste of time, and it's very hard for most employees to feel like they're advancing towards a goal if you give them that kind of a task. So it kind of backfires. So what I find more effective is to always move towards a real short-term goal. So it's not very amorphic and like work your way into being a part of the team, but more like here's a small little task that you need to do, and by the time you get through that task, you would have learned by doing the minimal amount of work or knowledge that you need in order to get that done. So what it creates is it creates a lot of knowledge that is very, it's very practical. It's very oriented toward delivering actual features. Now, sure, it's fragmented. Sure, the employee doesn't know everything, but in a large enough R&D group, nobody knows everything, right? So it's kind of an incremental path to learning where you do more and more features and you learn more and more stuff as you go. So both I, as a team leader, can benefit from that. If I were a team leader, then I would have gained from that. And also you as an employee would have, I think I get this feedback a lot, that people are feeling like they're doing real stuff, okay? So do we know, the question was, can we assume that they already know X, okay? And X can be Scala, JavaScript, React, Angular, TDD. I mean, continuous integration, agile programming, the whole, there's microservices-oriented architectures. There's tons of stuff to know if you want to be, developing on the Wix stack. There's tons of stuff that you need to know, and we can't assume that everybody knows it all. So again, what we're doing is we let people learn the minimum amount of knowledge they need in order to execute something.
Also the programming language.
The programming language is not, it's not an exception in this case. So maybe in this 2-week period, I would probably let the developer, and it's also very depending on the personality of the developer. Some people, they need additional context. They feel like they can't do a good job unless they have a bigger picture. So it's okay for me to, as far as I'm concerned, it's okay for you to sit and learn Scala, but you should, this is kind of a personal management style that I like, where I let the employees or like the team members manage their own time. So so it's like you have this task that you need to get through, and so you tell me how long do you think it's going to take you to go over this wiki, and one of the bullets is learn some Scala. So you tell me, so I'm going to limit it to like 2 or 3 weeks, but you can you can decide if you need it as a shorter period, because some people feel that 2 or 3 weeks is too much. Okay, so because I don't really need to know everything about Scala Z or functional programming or all that stuff. I'm going to write, I'm going to write Java in Scala, basically, what we call Jala in Wix. And I'm going to get the job done by writing Jala, and I'm going to fix it on a second iteration. So it's very depending on the type of the person that we're dealing with. But we don't assume anything. And with some aspects, it's even harder because stuff like TDD is even more rare, because people don't usually come with this knowledge from the outside. When they join us, sometimes it's the first time they heard of the concept of TDD. Okay? We get this less and less over the years, but certainly in the beginning, people didn't really know what we're talking about. So yeah, the question was, what am I doing? Okay, so my official title is I'm a technical coach. What this means, I used to be a developer for the backend team, and then I was a team leader for a while, and now I do this. And what this is basically is I sit with people and pair program with them, from all aspects of coding. So it can be Python, JavaScript, Scala, or any other thing that we use. Okay, so this is just step 1. Okay. Just 2-3 weeks. We don't care about the mess as much, because this will be covered next. But the key point here is for the new employee to talk to all the required people in order to get something into production and learn the very basics of the technological stack. The question was, is the wiki the main source of knowledge sharing tool, right?
Preservation and sharing.
Preservation and sharing. And my response is no, because it gets out of sync really fast. Okay, so how do we cover that aspect of knowledge sharing and preservation? It's an excellent point. I'm going to get to it further down the line. So let's move on. Let's say we're after we've covered the initial Hello World project, and the new guy has a working service in production. So next step is we're gonna start working on an actual project. Now, this actual project is not necessarily in the main line, in the main requests flow. It can be some side thing. It can be some experimental stuff that we work on. But the point is, it should be a real project, okay? It should be a real project with no hard deadlines. So it's kind of like a nice, you know, one of those nice to have things that one day we're gonna take care of kind of a thing, where it's not really important, but it's somewhere in the backlog. So those are good candidates for new employees, okay? So we take one of these, and we use mentoring system in which one of the team members is going to be pairing with the new employee on the toy task. Okay? And if it's a very busy team, then that should be the team, like the tech lead or the team lead's responsibility. They're not always the same guy. Sometimes the tech lead and the team lead are two different people. I'm talking about the technically, the technical expert of the team. Someone that's very knowledgeable of the domain and of the technical aspects of development. So what this means is we get a penalty because our velocity, the development velocity of the team is going to take a hit. But this cannot be overcome. We cannot, that's a price we have to pay. So it's kind of a self-regulating mechanism where you can't accept too many people at once because you don't have the capacity to, to train them. So it has to be self-regulating, and you have to sacrifice your best developer in order to do that in a most efficient way. Okay, but that's the way it is. So, so you should have a backlog of these, future tasks that are not really that important, but are useful as a learning tool. These are not toy projects. These are real projects that are going to be built and continuously deployed to production, just like any other software artifact that we produce. It's going to be developed by strictly following the development practices and rules, if you have them, of the team. In our case, it means it's going to be continuously deployed, as I said, which means it's going to be continuously built, continuously integrated, which means it has to be developed using TDD, because that's the way we choose to develop at Wix, or we are even forced to develop in this way. And pretty much that's it. Okay? So this is the toy project. It can take quite a while. It can take like a month or 2 or 3 months, depending on what's the task at hand. But
this is the second phase?
Yeah, this is the second phase. And this is the phase where you incur the heat of, where you pay the price of accepting a new member to the team, because that's when your top developer is going to be committed to that mostly. I'll discuss it in the next slide. And this is where we get to pair programming, which I think, and that also gets back to your question about knowledge preservance and knowledge spread. So pair programming is when two developers are working together on the same machine. So if you know about extreme programming and TDD and all that, it comes from that kind of discipline. So the key point here is by doing pair programming, it's like having a constant code review, okay? And I find them much more effective than code reviews, because code reviews, they have this they have this this tendency, right? Thank you. They have this kind of feature where you, if it's a 5-liner, like a 5-line change, you know, it can start a discussion that may last for weeks. But if it's a 500-line change, it's kind of like, yeah, looking good. Okay? So code reviews are great, and I use them also, but I think it's kind of missing the point, the whole point here. So not at this stage. Question was, is this for new employees only, or for you know, for veteran employees or whatever? So the answer is, it depends where. If you were to work in my team, you would have probably be doing a lot more pairing than, you know, than someone else that maybe works in a team that don't even do TDD. So it really depends. But the way I see it, that's the most effective tool to be for spreading the knowledge in a team. Sure, it can also mean that development is kind of cut by half. But exactly, but I don't think that's true. I think it pays off in the long term because of those 4 weeks you're going to be stuck because someone is in Thailand and nothing can be developed there because nobody touches this code, right? When you're doing the pairing thing, it's very hard to get into those situations where you have knowledge, you know, bottlenecks. So everybody touches everything, basically. So what we do is we begin with this very intensive work regime where we constantly work together. So I might spend the entire day sitting by someone and working with him. Now, when I say working with, I mean, to begin with, it's mostly you do the work and you explain constantly what you're doing. So it's very taxing. It's very tiring. It's hard to do it and maintain velocity. That's what I'm saying you're going to get. You have to pay whenever you, you know, you're getting a new employee into your team. So that's the price you're going to pay. It's tiring. But after a while, I find that you can take the foot off the pedal a bit and maybe, you know, maybe move to a 75% of the time pairing, and then maybe letting the developer do some work on their own for 25% of the time. And then for that work that's done, unsupervised work, I'm going to have a code review for that. And then you go to 50%, and then once you're there, it's mostly code reviews unless people want to continue working pairing, which I always encourage. But you know, you can't force anybody to do it. So if you find, so most of the time we get to a stage where people are mostly working alone, unless you're faced with some kind of a very specific problem that you want to pair with anybody from the team or from the outside, and then you set up a pairing session dedicated for one specific thing. So most of the coding is done on your own. And again, if it's a new, you know, if it's someone that's not very experienced outside of Wix, but you know, they don't have any experience at all, then I would have a lot more code reviews to begin with. But after a while, you develop some sort of a trust, you know, kind of a trust-based thing. So there's a good chance that either you were pairing with someone along the development of the feature, or someone reviewed most of your code. And it's kind of more of the developer's responsibility to ask for a review and not being mandated to do it, you know? And this is a kind of a cultural thing where you develop it in the team. You kind of by not forcing anybody to do anything, they see the benefit of doing it anyway, and everybody else is doing it anyway.
Somebody comes from a different place, especially if he's experienced, he's got a style usually.
Yes.
And so it would probably be more difficult
Yeah,
to
yeah,
adopt
of course.
new style.
Yes. So you need also to tailor this strategy to different personalities as well, of course. So if you're pairing with someone who's been doing this for 20 or 30 years, there's a good chance you would let him drive a lot more. Driving meaning using the keyboard while you do the shotgun, like you're supervising or just explaining what's wrong with this step or whatever, correcting small things. And also, when we interview people, it's a very rigorous, a very hard process, to go through. And we try to keep it the cultural aspect is very important. So if you, while interviewing someone, you understand that it's not going to, culturally, there's going to be some kind of friction there. You need to decide whether, there's other properties of that candidate that maybe are worth your while, but we place a heavy meaning, or we consider cultural aspects very important, even more than technical abilities at times. The question was how, if you're an experienced developer and you're coming to a different culture, and you see their naming conventions, their style guides, basically their coding culture does not sit well with what you know. And so you feel the urge to start changing things. So I'm kind of biased here, but I think I know this, for myself because I've been there in these situations. But I found that in Wix, to be honest, when it doesn't matter how how experienced you are as a developer, when you come to this company, the domain is very unique. The scales that we are facing are very unique. It's the exception. It's not what you see in most companies. And we're faced with different kind of architectural designs, kind of architectural constraints. If you don't know, we're hosting over 100 million sites. So all those page views is Wix traffic, basically. So it's quite a big chunk of the internet. And we're also doing it by continuous deployment. So if you take all that into consideration, it's for like 90% or 99% of the developers out there, it's a completely foreign environment. So you might be an ace VB programmer. I'm just exaggerating, for an effect. But you might be great at what you're doing, but when you come to Wix, it's kind of like people tend to, to get, at least at the beginning, they kind of go to the back seat of the car and then, and learn by watching, because it's a lot of uncommon situations and uncommon, and the cultural aspect in Wix is very unique as well. So combining all these together, most people, they voluntarily want to learn, to get up to par with, and to feel like they're part of the team, and they feel there's a lot to catch up and a lot to cover. So it's usually the case where you come with your preconceived idea of what's good code or what's good naming, and then you would sit with the pair and you would say, hey, why not? This is a member. We should call it M underscore something. And anybody's a Microsoft developer here? Yeah. So, and then you would probably get into a half-an-hour conversation of why that's not really important anymore or not really relevant in our context. Now, you might be right, and you know, and you would eventually convince me. But I find that after a while, those people who are very, they're very strong at what they're doing, when they catch up, then they have a much greater effect on decision making, on development, and everything else. And that's the final part is when you get ownership of over your code, and you're the owner of that artifact. And then the meaning of that is you're responsible for anything to do with that. Meaning if it's not working at the middle of the night on a Saturday, you're going to be the one who's going to take care of that. Now, when you got to that point, you're mostly going to prefer to do things as they are done already because people here know their shit. They've been through that, and they've been through the stage of where I need to take care of my service nightly because it's constantly flapping, and I know already what to do in order to prevent that. So I find that there's a lot to learn here, in other words. So people, and I think I heard it from a lot of people as well, they say, I have lots of years of experience, but I've never worked this way. And if you wait for the other lecture by Nimrod, which I hope I'm not stealing his time. I do steal his time. OK. So Nimrod will talk about that, about, he had a lot of experience when he came to Wix, and he would describe his aspect of it. OK, the question was, isn't code ownership or like service ownership is against the recommended agile practices of having a collective ownership? So my response to that is maybe it does, but it works for us. So we're OK with it. So, and that's true for everything we do. We adopt all sorts of crazy methodologies and ideas, but we also take what we need and throw what doesn't work for us. And for us, it's very beneficial. It's like, it's been working like this for a while, where eventually you get to be the owner of a service. So it's under your responsibility. That doesn't mean that you're the sole employee that knows what's going on there, because you've been pairing on it, and we have other mechanisms that promote knowledge sharing and that kind of stuff. We have a weekly bug hunt and product reviews that people explain their architectures and stuff like that to other teams. But it's mostly pairing and working together in the same room. But there's still going to be an ownership there. So basically, if you have 3 employees, it's usually 1 or 2 services per employee. OK? So you want to get there eventually. So the question was, does ownership also mean that you're the sole developer and you're the end-to-end, it's your end-to-end responsibility to develop the service? And the answer is yes, theoretically. Meaning, no. But no, I mean, we promote this notion of dev-centric culture, meaning a lot of the decisions are being done or driven by the requirements of the developer. So the developer has a lot of responsibility, but it also means that the developer has a lot of power as well. So we expect developers to drive the management process of the entire service. And you as a team leader, you're more of a coordinator and enabler for the developers to do their job. So if they need something to be done from the system team, that would be your job to to get that thing working for them, if they have any obstacles. But they're the ones responsible to get it working. And when I say working at Wix, it means deployed on production many times a day, and and when it doesn't work, taking care of that. Now, sometimes I say theoretically because sometimes, because of political situations and considerations, you get teams that are split and are not co-located. So, and it's and it's showing in the code because you see the silos in the code. You see that this piece of code and that piece of code were developed by two different people in two different rooms because of stuff that you see in the protocols or some weird aspects of the design. And you can tell when they were sitting together in the same room and maybe even pairing on that API decisions versus teams that are co-located. I mean, they're not co-located, and sometimes they just sit in the next room, but it still doesn't work. So it's where we do apply it, it's working fine, and you can tell. And sorry.
How do you apply it?
I believe, how do I apply it? So I strongly believe that it's all about interpersonal communication. It's not about technology. It's not about testing. It's not about any of that. It's about having a free and open discussion channel between two people, and by making sure that they sit together in the same physical space, you take a lot of the obstacles out of the way. It seems kind of funny because I can always chat that guy or whatever, but it's not the same. When they sit together, it's different, okay? The whole approach to development is different if we have a full stack situation going. Okay, so the question was, does it mean that that developer, being the dev-centric and all that, is it okay for him to push tasks into the backlog of the system team? And most definitely yes, and I would even go even further than that. We also believe that if you're blocked by someone else for...
Just enter a task, but where would it prioritize?
Yeah, I put it in the backlog, and it's their job to prioritize it. But if I see that it's going to take too long, I might just do it myself and then issue a pull request for them. And that's a very helpful tool anyway, because it kind of promotes code reviewing and also division of labor, because it's basically some of those backlog tasks that are under my team are being developed by other people, and we're all doing the same ceremonies. We're all doing TDD. We're all doing all that. So you're not going to be surprised by that. You're going to see, and if it doesn't comply to your standards, then you don't accept the pull request, and that's fine. And sometimes we get these pull requests, and the discussion is ping-ponging for back and forth, like 8 or 10, going back and forth. But eventually, it gets rejected or accepted, and it's a good method that I recommend. So, and the last point I want to make is paying it forward, meaning all that investment you make, it should be projected back into new employees that are joining the team next. And basically, this is the model for growth. So you teach the job one or two people. Now they can do it the same process with new employees, and your ability to grow as a team and to get more and more tasks is blocked by your ability to perform this, this process in parallel. So if you have 3 or 4 strong developers, you can usually get 2 new employees working at the same time. And if it's more than that, I find that it's not going to work. Okay, so we have to be very you know, you have to be preservative with your growth rate. We're crazy in this aspect. We're constantly shifting and changing and upgrading. Constantly, there are some guys here are just nuts. They really need like bleeding edge stuff working, the latest and greatest. Yeah, so that happens a lot, and you have to have, and it's a kind of a privilege to be able to do that, and to be able to do that safely without any downtime. We have those as well, but with minimized downtime, you would have to have a huge, you know, suite of tests that covers every aspect of your system, and you can only get that there by doing TDD. That's a whole other lecture that we need to do at some other time. But so yeah, so if you do TDD and you know how to do it right, there's a good chance you're going to have this ability to, you know, start up the development with some MySQL instance and get to a point where that's no longer going to work. So I'm going to just swap in some Cassandra in there or some other NoSQL solution, and everything just works. So it's not that great all the time, but sometimes it is that great. And then you can feel the power of having all those tests in place. Like some stuff that you know would have taken you like a month or like half a year sometimes, you know, can be done in an hour. So we do that a lot. That's a real challenge, by the way. And what we try to do, okay, so the question was, what do you do in a situation where you have remote developers, as we do in Wix? So what we do is we constantly try to get people from Israel to go there for periods of 1 week. And while there, we do a lot of pairing. Other than that, they also come here for periods of a week or even more. To begin with, they come here for longer periods, and they sit with us and work with us. And we also have, by the way, I didn't even talk about it, but we also have like a program to, you know, to get people to learn, to teach the basics, basically. So we have this Kickstart program going, where people, we wait for a bunch of candidates to gather, and then once we have 10 or 20 of them, or new employees, we'll invite them for a period of, sometimes it's even up to 3 months, I think, where they learn, or we teach them basically everything I've showed here. And sometimes this isn't done like that, but it's being done on the team. So maybe some developer from Ukraine would come and sit with the team and learn the job on the job. And then when they're back, you know, they're going to have some questions, and we do a lot of that. And it's very hard to do it. You know, the geographical distance is taking its toll, but we try to find ways to bridge that by meeting as much as possible. Okay, so I'll clear the stage for Nimrod. Thank you.